And welcome back to the Conservative News Channel on YouTube, ladies and gentlemen. Today we stop and take a look at Florida and see if it can tell us anything about what may be going on throughout the United States. But before I get to that, I would like to bring up a conversation that I had with a person that works in the registration office. She was telling me that there are people all over the country that she's been talking to that work in similar positions to herself who have indicated that during the last 6 months that there has been a steady and constant flow of Democrats coming in and changing registration to either Republican or not affiliated, no party affiliation. In the state of Florida, that is kind of confirmed by elections office data that was put out recently. Here in Florida, you're not allowed to register to vote at the last minute and put in a ballot. There is a deadline, and we've crossed that deadline. So at this point, everyone who's eligible to vote has been registered. That's what prompted Politico to do this article, Where's the Blue Wave? Voter data show Florida Democrats aren't surging. Interestingly enough, keep in mind that Politico is a very left-wing organization, and everything that they've done here, they have used rounding to get full points to make it look a little bit better for the Democrats than it really is. But as I went through the article, I went and found a variety of other sources for data, and to some degree they are accurate. Like I said, rounding errors is really what they did. They rounded in favor of the Democrats. But one of the first things that struck me was the fact that Democrats in 2016, registered Democrats, amounted to a little bit over 39% of the electorate. Going into this election, because of that steady flow of people switching parties, they are coming into this election at actually just below 37%. As a result, the Democrat registration in the state of Florida has declined by 10% since Trump took office. Another interesting point is the black community dropped 6% to 28% of the registered Democrat voters. So there is definitely a drift away from the Democrats in the black community that is showing up inside the statistics in Florida. About 6% took the time to re-register. What that basically tells you is that 6% has taken the red pill because they want to vote Republican. There's an awful lot of people like myself back when Reagan was elected. I was a Democrat. I voted against Reagan the first time. But very quickly I realized that I had taken some bad advice from some teachers at school that convinced me to be a Democrat, and I converted to Republican. But I carried that Democrat registration for probably 3 election cycles before I finally had a reason I wanted to vote in the primaries. And in Florida, you can't do that. A Democrat can't vote for a Republican in the primaries. So I finally had to go down and change. So the 6% slip in the African American community does not suggest that that's the total slip. Those are just the ones that are motivated and want it out. Those are the red pills. Those are the best, because when a voter just abstains from voting because they're angry at their party, that only counts as 1 vote. But when they switch and they vote for the other side, that's a -1 for the Democrat and a +1 for the Republican. Looks like 2 votes on paper. Also, interestingly enough, what I'm seeing here is that the Democratic Party, for the first time, they have lost enough white voters in the state that they are now a majority party. 52% of registered Democrats in the state of Florida are minorities. Another area of great interest to me is the Hispanic voters in the state of Florida. And the reason that was important, it's because a lot of Puerto Ricans that are staunch Democrats relocated here to Florida because of the hurricane. And Democrats and a lot of other people have been talking about how if they register to vote in the state of Florida, that they could seriously impact Florida, tilting it further to the left. The fact of the matter is, though, the Hispanic community grew over the last 2 years their share of the electorate by just 1%, which is actually low compared to previous election cycles. Hispanics, because of the numbers moving into the state, tend to be in the 2 to 3% range. So this is actually down. The probability of a large number of those Puerto Ricans registering to vote is very low. So that doesn't look like it's going to have the impact that a lot of Democrats in this state were hoping for. As we get ready to conclude this, what we're going to talk about is the early voting that has taken place. The early voting right now has Republicans up by 8%, almost 9% actually. And if you go back and look at 2016, at this point in the election cycle, they only had about a 4.5% advantage over Democrats in early voting. And that rose 15 days before the election to 6 points. So what we're seeing in the early voting is that we actually have a very strong, favorable numbers coming in for the GOP, not for the Democrats. So the wave is definitely not here in the state of Florida. So when you add it all together, what you're seeing is minority participation in the Democratic Party is slipping. You're seeing white participation in the Democratic Party in the state is slipping. And keep in mind, this is a state where when you run for governor, if you've got 51.5% of the vote on election day, that's a landslide. Now, if you extrapolate what's going on and assume that come election day, these numbers are going to be similar in nature to what's going to actually show up on election day, it's seriously my opinion that the governorship will probably be won by DeSantis by more than the usual 2 or 3 point spread. It may be as high as 5 or 6 point spread. In the case of the Senate race, very much the same thing. I have been projecting the Republican victory at about 50-51%, very small margin, but a victory. That's the way Florida is. That's the reason we flip on the presidency from one party to the other, because it doesn't take a lot of people to change their mind in order to flip this state blue or flip this state red. But based on everything that we're seeing in this early voting cycle and the completion of registration, the Democrats are going to lose statewide about 3-4% of their base, and it's going to turn in favor of the GOP, or it's not going to turn up at all, which means that the state of Florida, when it's all said and done and the smoke settles, is going to be more red than it has been in the past. And those people who dropped out of the Democratic Party, reducing their percentage of total voters here, those are people that took the red pill and aren't coming back. But the big thing that we're all going to be looking for is not just how minority voters are switching to the GOP, but those millennials. And millennials don't tend to absentee ballot, so they're not in this. We really won't know until election day. And if the millennials have flipped 54% for the GOP, this is going to be a very wide margin of victory, something that we're not used to in the state of Florida. In any case, all of the early indications are that we are seeing GOP strength and Democrat weakness in a state that, like I said, a 51.5% victory is a huge victory here. very marginal. So Florida remains red. Florida is looking good. And if it's indicative of what's taking place across the country, we Republicans are going to have a lot to celebrate if we all get to the polls and vote. With that said, thank you very much for coming to the Conservative Channel on YouTube. We're glad to have you. And remember, don't forget to like and subscribe and share. It's the only way people are going to find us. With that said, I'll see you in the next video.